Okay, so good evening. We're broadcasting here on our Google Hangout for the Blended Learning Essentials Getting Started course, which is running on the FutureLearn platform. We've just opened the Google Hangout, so just as I introduce, we'll be seeing some people joining us. So we'll just do introductions just in a second when everybody's joined the Hangout. So if you just bear with us just for a few seconds.
Oh. You know, hotels normally have one of those "Do Not Disturb" signs on the door. There isn't one here. I don't know. Just have to hope. I'll send them away.
So we're just waiting for people to join the Google Hangout. Okay, we've got 2 people. Gives me some reassurance that it's all working. Yeah, here we are. People are joining now. So good evening. My name's Neil Morris. I'm one of the course educators on Blended Learning Essentials. I'm here with my colleagues Diana Lorillard from the Institute of Education at University College London and Rachel Challen from Loughborough College, and we're here this evening to do a live Q&A based on the questions that we've received on the FutureLearn platform. We will also try and take some of the questions from participants as they appear on the live chat, and I'll be keeping an eye on Twitter, the hashtag FLBLE1, if you want to ask questions on there. So we'll make a start. We've got just under an hour. If you want to type your questions, you can. I think there's an applause button, so if you agree with something that's been said, you'll be able to show your approval, and you'll be able to watch the recording of this session on the YouTube channel afterwards. So let's get started. What we've got is the questions that have been asked on the platform. So what I'm going to do is read the questions out and then ask either Diana or Rachel, or I will answer them, and then we'll have a look at some of the questions that appear a bit later on. So our first question, let me just get this for you. So one of the questions that we've had is around the applicability of blended learning to different education sectors. So this question for Diana is: Will blended learning work well with primary children? Will blended learning work as well with primary children as it does with secondary and tertiary education? So Diana, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Neil. You should be able to hear me now. And I think this is an important question because we all know that small children are very good with technology. They're very good at learning how to use it. This doesn't mean that they know how to learn with technology any more than it would for anybody else. So it's very important that in any sector we give teachers the opportunity to experiment with their learners and find out what kinds of things work well with them. Certainly we know that there have been many very successful experiments with primary school children using technology. So partly it depends on what you mean by blended learning. If you mean using technology as part of a classroom experience, then of course there's lots of ways in which that's been done. But there's also using technology in the sense that you're getting students to do their homework using technology, or you're putting them online, and that's also been very important and explored within primary education. We did run a MOOC on this last year, and it was repeated again this year on the Coursera platform called ICT in Primary Education, where we had thousands of teachers from all sorts of different cultures sharing their ideas and experiences on this. And of course, in some cultural areas in the world, it would not be permissible for a child to be online. In others, they spend a lot of time online. So it's an extremely variable context at the moment. I don't think you could say everywhere that it's working well, but certainly in the UK, there are plenty of very good examples of teachers making great use of technology in the classroom and linking through to the home as well, where the value of that is that the parents can be involved in the child's education. Of course, you have to be very careful about safety online, and the school has to have a clear policy about that, but certainly it can and does work. But it takes time and careful innovation to be sure that you're doing it well.
That's great. Thank you very much, Diana. Okay, let's move on to an important aspect of the course that many people have been raising with us. The issue of evaluation, and we've had a number of questions about our own course, but I think it's important to perhaps address these in the context of online learning and blended learning courses generally. So perhaps Rachel first, and then maybe Diana would like to add in. Shall we give the participants some examples of how we're planning to evaluate this course, what sort of approaches that we're using, and how we plan to share that evaluation with participants. So Rachel, would you like to start?
Yeah, certainly. Hi everyone. So I'm part of the evaluation team for the course, and it's really important that we look at what the course has been doing and how people have interacted, and to make sure that we're doing or presenting and developing a course that's helpful and really works for the people in the sector, for the whole vet sector and beyond actually, because I think it goes beyond vet as well. The evaluation that is happening for the actual course has been ethically approved by the Institute of Education, so it's a full and ethical process. And what we're really interested in, there is the quantitative side, so how many people have signed up, how many people have stayed the course, but the real interest comes from the qualitative side, the stories and the rich things that are happening outside of those quantitative stuff. So has there something happened in the course that's really helped you to evaluate what you do, has helped you to reflect on your own practice, and then has helped you to do something and maybe then building it. So it's the stories that we're really interested in, and we're going to look at those in various ways. We're going to do some individual interviews, we're going to do some focus groups, and we're also going to look at the conversations that have been happening within the course as well. So that's the kind of start of the things that we're going to do in the course itself. I don't know if Diana wants to add anything extra to that.
Great, thank you, Rachel. Maybe Diana can say something about evaluation of courses generally.
Well, I think one of the things that we're also doing with this, of course, is using the pre- and post-course surveys, and they can be very important for looking at the demographics of who stays and who goes, and what kind of responses that people have, because we asked a number of questions about attitude to blended learning and local context and so on right in the pre-course survey, so we repeat those questions at the end in the post-course survey to find out something about whether attitudes have changed or understanding has changed, or the extent to which the course met people's needs, whether there was too much or too little resource in it. The big problem, of course, with a post-course survey is that the only people who answer it are the people who stayed all the way through. So it's pretty hard to find out what happened to the people who didn't stick with us. And we're fortunate this time. I think we've got the digital champions to help us with that, because they're plugged into their local colleges and to the way that people are responding there. So that will help us a bit. As Rachel has outlined, what comes into the forums is really valuable for understanding where things need to be modified in the next run of the course. For example, some of the quiz questions haven't worked very well, so we're trying to think of better ways to do some of those. So there's that kind of modification of actually what's in the course. The other really important thing is that we get so much from the participants. So there's some great collections of resources and so on, which is another kind of I suppose it's not an evaluation of the course, it's more an evaluation of what the course generates from its participants and the extent to which it works as a community. Excuse me, is what the kind of thing that's telling us. So in general, what we do when we're doing an evaluation of a course is to look at its intended learning outcomes, the ambitions for that course, and try to organize the evaluation data around where we're going to get the best data to tell us that. Both for summative purposes, you know, was this a good course? Did it do what it was intended to do? And we have to report back to the UFI Charitable Trust on that, obviously. But also for formative purposes. So we're going to be running this course twice more next year. And part of the point of doing 3 runs was that we would be able to improve it each time in the light of participants' comments. So I think it's following fairly standard evaluation procedures. The great benefit is that we have a bit more on the diversity of demographics of the participants because of the pre-course survey. So typically with courses we don't have that much demographic information about the students on them.
Great, that's great.
Okay.
Thank you both of you. Mark Maguire on Twitter is agreeing with you, saying about how stories are hard to capture with analytics, and qualitative information is just as important, and I think we would all agree with that.
Absolutely.
Great. So a couple of things came up, I think, in there, Diana, that lead us into the next set of questions. So the first one was about this sense of community on the course and how we can help to extend that community once the course is finished. You've already mentioned, of course, that the course runs 2 more times, and there's another course as well. But can you share with some people some ideas that we have around continuing the community and allowing people to continue to share their practice?
Yes, one obvious way is that with the next course, I noticed that people are already beginning to sign up for that, and that's a natural progression from this course is into the one which is running next February for 3 weeks, which is about blending learning essentials, embedding practice. So it's taking the getting started ideas and capabilities and building on that to make sure that it's working as well as it can in a sustainable way in your local environment. So that's one way in which the community will continue. And in some ways, it would make sense for it to continue in the further runs of the course next year, because you will already be familiar with what's been in it, and with some of the videos, 1 or 2 might get updated, but broadly speaking, the resources are going to be the same. But you'll know what's there, and you'll know that there were those resources that you thought about going back to at some future time, and that would be an opportunity to do it and to see what other people are talking about. So that's one kind of channel. Maren has suggested that she might set up something like a Google Plus community, and I think doing something through the Association for Learning Technology would be a very good idea, because so many people are members who are in this group, and that would be one obvious way to go, because there'd be a lot of like-minded people there sharing ideas across subject areas as well. And then we've been talking to JISC, because JISC is interested in providing a kind of service to the further education and vocational education community, because that's what their role is, to serve the HE and FE communities. And they are looking, we were having a conversation in the meeting just this morning about this, about how they might support such a community, and what services they would provide, where you might help people store and share ideas and collect their personal data, as well as collective resources that you might use in your institution, or that you might be sharing with like-minded teachers in other institutions. So JISC is another possible route towards doing this. So I'm afraid we don't have a definitive answer at the moment. And of course, another thing which participants have suggested is setting up Facebook groups, and I think somebody has already even got around to doing that. So that will be a community-sourced approach to continue what we're doing now. So
Great, thank you.
We're on it.
Great. And I think the other thing to mention, because I'm sitting here following Twitter, and I know that Rachel's actually tweeting as she's sat here. But just the hashtags on the on Twitter have become their own, forming their own community, and it's really nice to see people using the hashtag, not just related to course materials, but also to things that they're just finding that they're then sharing with the whole community. So I hope that those great. Thank you. So one of the other things that then links to the lifetime of the course is a question that we've had that said, I'd love to see any easy reference document bringing together all the tools and their types of uses as an offering from this course. And it feels like it was a planted question, but I'm pleased to say that we were one step ahead of this question. So we've done two things in terms of collating the resources, and there's some other things to do, but all of the case study videos are already publicly available on a video sharing site, and the link is within the course, and we'll do more to promote that. So all of the videos are accessible now. And participants have given us great feedback about the crib sheets that are in the See Also section of the course, and they're a wonderful collection of resources that people can take with them after the course, and they really provide that insight and support for all of the tools and approaches that we've used. And that collection of crib sheets will be available now as a collection in both PDF form and in ebook form. So those resources will live on beyond the course and will hopefully form a really useful toolkit for people going into their practice and to take with them through their professional development. The other thing that we haven't yet done, but we'll do when the course finishes, is collate the links and all the resources that participants have provided, because there's been hundreds of links to really useful resources that have been posted by participants on the course, and we have quite an easy way to collate those together and to put them into a collection. And I think Diana and I might be using some of them in future runs of the course, because there's certainly some things that have come up that I certainly wasn't aware of. So sharing will be happening from the participants, which is always what we hoped for. So we have a way to answer those questions in terms of getting people access to those resources. Okay. So there's a question that's popped up actually in the forum, so let me select this question here. So this is a question that says, how do we ensure all or most in a class, we're talking about the learners here, have competence with a tool such as Mahara, which is an e-portfolio tool? If we as educators find it complex, how are we going to ensure that our learners have competence with a tool before they are asked to use it? Rachel, have you any experience of springing a new tool onto a group of learners and making sure that they're equipped to use it effectively?
Yeah, absolutely. We spring quite a lot of stuff on lots of people, actually. People often see me in the corridor and go, surprise, because that's what I always do. But I think particularly from Mahara, because I think one of the case studies was from Loughborough about how our motor vehicle tutor uses Mahara for his motor vehicle students, obviously, and that was a real barrier to get over, because they're very practical. They don't often see the value of doing something online because they want to, have their heads in engines and things. And what we found were actually that we just got a couple of student champions in the class. So we made the member of staff was comfortable in what he was trying to achieve. And I think when you're trying to introduce a tool like that, it's about what the outcomes are. It's not about talking about Mahara, actually, or talking about an e-portfolio, or talking about Veerli. It's actually, we want to extend what we do in the class, or we want to make it more accessible, or we want to give another edge. And it's coming at it from a teaching and learning perspective that always wins every time. And once you've got the teaching and learning perspective, you can show that there's going to be a really good impact, without saying that it's going to be easy or there's going to be no front loading, because we don't want to feel. But actually that's going to be really successful in terms of return on investment, on time investment. So you make the tutor comfortable with what they're trying to achieve, and then actually you work with the students, and the students then have this self-bubbling community that works, and they support each other. So, and we've used that on a variety of levels, actually from entry 3 right up to level 3, and it does work, really does work. You will get at least one student in a class that will take it on, and is enthusiastic and wants to show that they can do it, and because maybe they're not strong in other areas, but they can be strong in this area. So it's also a really good stretch and challenge and confidence booster for some of the students.
That's great, thank you. I'm going to lead into another question off the back of that, Rachel, that I've just noticed someone's posted on the platform that's really related to this. So it says, how do we really find the best learning technology for adult learners who are juggling work, home and learn? Case studies explaining how these technologies work with the end of day I'm tired learners. And I think that relates to, doesn't it, the idea of you've thought about the competence and you've thought about the training, but how do you keep the learners engaged with new technologies when they might not see the relevance? Have you got some insights there?
I'm not sure insights, but certainly I would like to think that how you would approach that would be, if it is about the value, so does something happen on that platform that perhaps they don't get? Is that where you introduce flipped learning? Is that where you make some accessible webinar talking that they can talk about assessments, so when they are tired, or when they put the children to bed, or whatever it is, or they've finished a long shift, there's something there for them that they can just dip into and dip out of that actually then reinforces the learning as they go along. So it's about snippets of stuff, and of course technology is just the most amazing thing to be able to support those kind of learners. It's definitely not a barrier, it's definitely the way forward for them. So.
Thank you. Diana, do you want to add anything to that?
That question caused me to reflect on the way things happened at the Open University, because of course there all the learners were adults, and they were all mature learners working with families and so on, and life gets in the way of study every single time. So what you have to do when you're running a course is to counter that in some way. And I remember when I first arrived at the OU, one of the words I heard most often was procrastination, and how you help students not procrastinate. I think it's what we all need now, actually, because the internet's made all our lives so busy, and being able to balance work and life generally has become more and more difficult. So one of the ways in which we do that is by not overloading the course, and we try to keep it to 4 hours a week, but I think we're going to try and make it even less than that. And one of the things that Rachel mentioned was the value of the flexibility. So being able to dip in and out as and when you can is very important. But making it the next most important thing to do in your life is what our job is as people who are running and designing the course. That's one of the reasons why I think the idea of badges and accreditation is important, because it does help people to see that there is that sort of end in view, so you can make it small steps towards that. But really, it wins if it's doing what people actually need in their work. So that's why the forums are so valuable, because that's where we get the sense of the extent to which this is doing for people what they want. So that's the best way to win it.
Great, thank you. So I think the next natural question from that comes from the platform, where learners ask about how we can, some suggestions about how to control the flow of learning tools. So how to ensure a learner has completed one section successfully before progressing into the next section. Can this be done with free apps, or is it more complicated? And I think the answer often there is going to depend on the platform that you're using. But we've been, during this course, been talking about virtual learning environments, and virtual learning environments do have a good range of tools for providing gateways for learners, and for providing kind of adaptive solutions, so that you can test a student's competence with a particular activity and make sure they've met that learning outcome before moving them on to a new activity. And also you can personalize that experience by providing junctions in the learning, so that they can actually direct learners to a different set of resources based on the outcome of a quiz or a test. that is all entirely possible within the kind of commercial virtual learning environments. It's a higher level of skill in terms of the proficiency that you have to have with the tools to do it, but it is possible. But for those people who don't have access to a virtual learning environment, that is a much more challenging question, I think, to say how do you support a learner through a tool to another. It's about that scaffold the learners, and when you're doing that with a whole range of different tools, perhaps tools curated around the web, I think you've got to find a way to give a cohesive story to the learner, to make sure that that journey that they're taking is sensible and has a flow and has a narrative to it. And it's one of the great things about MOOC platforms is that they do enable that narrative, they enable that story to happen. I guess it was one of the big challenges of the CMOOCs, which were much more about the distributed web and finding your way around a jungle, a forest of tools and activities when you weren't necessarily able to navigate that journey, whereas the current platforms enable you to progress through something in a much more structured way. I can see Diana's nodding, so you might want to jump in there.
Well, I mean,
it was just unmute, Diana.
Yes, I did manage to unmute it. Yes, I think it's incredibly important to have that default narrative line to any course, so that a learner knows the trajectory they're going along. But having that means that you don't have to lockstep them into making some required progress at each stage, because sometimes a learner needs to go beyond the current stage to be able to see the context in which that is used. I mean, you know, you can talk about that in specific contexts, I suppose. Certainly, I remember in teaching maths, for example, that moving on before somebody had fully mastered something to more difficult problems and then going back to it, people saw the point of what they were doing, and that's just one example of how you don't necessarily want to insist on mastery learning at every stage. You know, we've got beyond that kind of expectation. The technology does that, so there is a little danger that commercial operations will do exactly that. They will program students into a particular learning pathway. And I think the value that the teacher brings is being able to allow that pathway to be disturbed a bit and let the learner explore a bit more, but know where they're supposed to be at every stage. And then you can have much more student-directed learning when they have the ability to be able to test themselves, keep going back to that test, try it again until they feel comfortable with what they're doing. So leaving the learner plenty of flexibility, as well as being very clear about the default narrative, I think that gets the best of both worlds.
Great, thank you. You're getting a lot of agreement on Twitter about what you've just said there, Diana. And Richard Nelson, who's one of our digital champions on the course, just said on Twitter, personalized learning is what we do in teaching. We can create personalized learning environments in OER tools like WordPress. So there's clearly examples in the community of how people have done this without the commercial virtual learning environments. Okay, so leading on from what we've just been talking about, there's another question in the platform, which is about workplace learning. So the question says, how can self-learning be encouraged in the workplace learning environment? Anybody want to have a stab at that, Diana? Perhaps?
Sorry, I didn't quite hear the question, and I haven't quite got back to where it is in the platform either, as I can't see it. Can you repeat the question?
I can. I've just lost it as well. How can self-learning be encouraged in the workplace learning environment? So how do we encourage people who are in a work environment to regulate their own learning?
Okay, well, as ever, it depends on the learner's own motivations, what's going to help them. And workplace environments do motivate people to get training and development, and they're very keen for people to do it in their own time. So there ought to be some workplace reward for what people do in terms of self-learning. I mean, again, the value really comes down to the intrinsic value for the individual. They've got to be able to see this is a value to me, so that a workplace environment that is expecting people to train themselves, which I have to confess that very often HE does. When we have a lot of casual workers in HE who come in as tutors, very little staff development is provided for those people, which is often a very unfair way to treat them. And you can see exactly the same thing in the private sector, where people are expected to go away and do the training in their own time, and that's become increasingly likely when you no longer have a training course that people go to in a place, but you provide e-learning, which means they can do it any time, and therefore they can do it at home and not during work time. So we must be careful not to abuse that flexibility. And make sure that there is sufficient value, intrinsic value, in doing the study for the learner to do it because they enjoy it and want to do it, and they can see what it will do for them. I think that's the best answer I can think of for that.
That's great, thank you. Yeah, it's hard work answering these on the fly, isn't it? So I'll take the next one, give you two a break. Changes, there's a question here about future strategies, I guess. So changes in education are long-term changes and require involvement at all levels, from the classroom facilitator to the Minister of Education. How can we speed up the change process towards a blended learning approach in institutions of learning? So this is, I guess, what I do for a job at the moment, is try to facilitate change in our HE institution and supporting other universities in the sector. Change in educational institutions is incredibly challenging, but when you get change to happen, it's really, really rewarding for everybody involved. And I think that's actually one of the best ways to get people involved in change, is to think about the rewards that can come from a new way of thinking, looking at new horizons, and particularly the feedback and the joy, actually, and enthusiasm that you get from learners from trying something new and seeing the fruits of your labour. Of course, none of us like to change the way we do things, because change involves work, but actually adopting digital technology, I believe, can really refresh people really a number of times with educators at the University of Leeds who we've worked with to create massive open online courses, and they've often come to the process incredibly reticent about the value of digital technology, and even basic things as being recorded, and bar none, all of those people have gone away from it with new ideas, refreshed enthusiasm for teaching, and a confidence to just try things out. And so I think the answer I always give about culture change in education is to give people the evidence, give people the skills, equip them to try things out, and let them see the results with their own students, and then pass it on to their colleagues, because there's nothing like a positive corridor conversation between local colleagues to get change to happen. It doesn't come from senior management, it comes from peers, and that's my best guess at that one. Okay, there's a question here about, please, sorry. Let me just unmute Diana.
I think I did it twice or something, sorry. I mean, the only thing I'd add to that, which I thought was absolutely spot on, is to be opportunistic, which I think is what we've done with MOOCs, because nobody could have predicted that saying to their Vice-Chancellor, I think it would be a really good idea to spend a lot of money on developing free education for highly qualified professionals, which is essentially what MOOCs are. But, that took off, and it took off amongst all of those Russell Group type universities who don't really pay any attention to teaching at all. So those of us who were quite anxious about the pedagogic quality and value of what was offered in a MOOC for undergraduates, and especially as undergraduates honestly aren't really taking MOOCs, it's people like us who are on this Hangout. nonetheless, they are fantastic for CPD, for professional development, and I think they're enormously valuable, and we learn so much from each other through having this sort of process available to us. But that's an opportunity to see how you can take it back into the undergraduate curriculum once you've infused those academics in the way that Neil described. So you could not possibly have predicted that this would be a potential route to persuading the Vice-Chancellor that blended learning is a good idea, but you have to be opportunistic.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've just won the next question, Diana, because there's a good question that follows that says, how will teaching change? What about teacher training in blended learning? I guess the question is, should trainee teachers be learning more about blended learning? We've had quite a few people on the platform say this course should be part of formal teacher training. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I agree. I think this kind of approach is very good, and what I like about the kind of CPD type of development is that it's two-way. It's very clearly a two-way process between the people running the course and the participants. We've set it up to be like that. We've set it up to be a community that learns together, and I think, in a way, a better model is the kind of thing that we do in scholarship and research, where you have things like journals where people build on each other's work, learn from each other, and then contribute back when they found something out themselves. And if we can be operating like that, that's much better. Of course, in the early stages, people need to be introduced in training courses, and this MOOC actually is running as part of the PGCE for further education at the Institute of Education. So these simple ways of enabling people to experience, get some ideas, see what other people are doing who are like them, is enormously valuable, and we just need much more of it, and to give people the time to do it as well. So it's not just CPD, it's also the initial training. Yes, absolutely right.
Rachel, do you want to add anything about how this sort of course should be embedded into professional development within colleges like Loughborough?
Absolutely, 100% agree with everything that's been said, because it's so important that initial teacher training allows our new teachers or retraining teachers or whoever they are to experience digital as a student, because it's that they can take into the classroom, because so often it's our students may not like it, or other reasons which kind of cloud confidence sometimes, but actually getting teachers, trainee teachers, to experience the range of things and allowing them space and time to reflect on actually what would work for their style, for their subject, for the students, the level of students that they're expecting to reach. But more than the technology, the particular technology, it's about mindset. It's about actually how do you make sure that those teachers approach this whole toolkit with a load of stuff in, of which tech is one part. How do they approach this whole toolkit and able to choose the right thing at the right time that suits their situation? And it's just vital. Sorry, I'm in a bit of a soapbox. It's just vital that it's in that teacher training environment. And I think ITT is a great way for it to start, but this MOOC is also excellent for making it embed on a small scale, so it's not too intrusive on time and resources, and so that people get a flavour of what's happening, a flavour of what they can do, and a flavour of being a student with all these forums going on, with all the multimodal conversations that's happening, and that's really crucial as well.
Great, thank you both. As you know, we've had a large number of people enrolled on the course from a number of countries around the world, and whilst we take for granted the quality of our broadband, well, Diana and I are both in hotel rooms, so we're kind of nervously waiting for it to collapse, but we take for granted power and electricity. But we have had people on the platform talking about, you know, these basic commodities, and they are struggling with the concept of the necessity of power for everything that we've been talking about. So there was a question that I thought was really very powerful. So the question says, if we run out of power for some time, what would be a substitute for this method or paradigm? We could manage it with normal discussion and a lecture method, but could we have any other substitute for technology if we were doing blended learning? It's a difficult question, isn't it? If your classroom relies on digital technology and relies on power, what do you do without it? I suspect as educators we've all been in a situation where the technology has failed, and we'll have, I suspect, turned to a kind of flipped approach where we'll say, right, we're going to have some discussion, we're going to sit around and we're going to do some problem solving, and we may have to go back to the pen and paper. And it doesn't need to be a disastrous teaching and learning session if that happens. It just requires us as educators and be able to recover from any situation. But I'm not sure how to deal with the lack of power for some time. I can see ways around it for short periods, but it is a very challenging issue, isn't it?
I thought that question was about the short-term loss of power, rather than being in a country where you don't have proper electrical support or infrastructure support. If you're in that situation, you know where you are, you know how to cope with that fact, and you know that it's your turn on the generator in the village that week or whatever it is. So you can plan for that. The problem for most of us is the unexpected outage. And increasingly, universities and colleges have to be absolutely sure that they are getting much, much better response than they ever had to do in, 40 years ago now probably, but we have to be sure that we're online all the time. However, what that question also made me think about was all the times when technology has come to the rescue. So there are times when there are other kinds of disasters going on, when, for example, the 7/7 bombings impacted seriously on the Institute of Education because there was a lot going on around Bloomsbury, and there were places closed, students couldn't get in, lectures couldn't take place, so we had to rely on online communication to support that. Lots of situations where in the West Country schools have a standard provision for when there's too much snow and the students can't get into school, and so they have school-home link-ups and deliver homework in different ways. You know, there are all sorts of ways in which having that additional channel of communication and delivery is a fail-safe for all the other kinds of disasters that can happen, quite apart from the power outages. But that shouldn't stop us from making sure that the IT people support us with 99.99999% coverage.
Okay, great, thank you. There's been a few comments on Twitter about this one, and somebody said about, you know, using SMS on smartphones or mobile phones, not smartphones, but in countries where you have to go back to the basics. SMS is a successful intervention, and something I've used successfully with students myself actually in university is just SMS feedback on quizzes. Great, so now we're getting to this point where we're suddenly getting a flurry of questions on Twitter and on here, and I'm a bit worried about whether we'll get to answer them all, but let's have a go. In fact, let me just make a request that Colette Murphy's posted a question about this GIST report. I'm just struggling to see the question, so perhaps if you could just post that again, we'll come back to it in a second. There's a couple of questions. I'll just take this top one about the course itself and how many people are still enrolled. This is always interesting, isn't it? So there's 13,000 people joined the course, or about 50% of them, as is true of most MOOCs, actually engage actively in the course. Actually, the engagement figures over the last 2 or 3 weeks have naturally dropped, but we still have just over 1,000 people engaging with the course in week 5. I've just literally looked at the stats as we were on the platform, and around half of those are actively commenting. So the question says, I get the feeling that I was reading comments from the same 30 people or so. It's actually about 500 who are commenting this week. Been very interesting research going on in this space at the moment. We've just been analysing a whole bunch of MOOCs that we've done over the last couple of years to find out if there's any relationship between people's comments and their likelihood to complete and the the frequency in which they comment and how it impacts on their learning community and their engagement with the course. So we're learning a huge amount about online learning behaviour, which will really help education in the future. So always interesting to get people's questions in that space. So there's another question here about to what extent have the type of skills the educator needs to design, deliver and support blended learning into mainstream teacher and educator competency frameworks, to what have they been considered? I think there might be a bit missing off the back of the question, but I guess it's saying how much have we thought about the skills that educators need to have to be able to use blended learning. So shall we try and answer that question? Rachel, do you want to say something first from your perspective of the FE sector in terms of how well do you think we've matched the sort of skills that colleagues of yours have against the kind of skills they need to be able to deliver blended learning?
Slowly, I think would be the things. We're getting there, and it's about mindset. It's about it's about the external influences as well. It's about class size. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes on in FE that pushes doing innovative stuff or change of teaching behaviour. Just pushes it to the back because, you know, I do what I do because it worked last time, it's going to work again. If I change it, I'm going to have a whole host of other stuff to sort out. So I think it's slowly, and it's a definite strategy that needs in each institution to be able to work towards. And we get there, but it's about seeing the value. It's about providing really sound technology. And developing confidence. Building on the question before, I think one of my most successful technology classes when I was teaching PebblePad, I think, or an ePortfolio, other ePortfolios are available, was that everything went down, all the technology went down. I basically did the session by the power of mime, I think. And what happened from that session was that the teachers in there said that was the key thing for them because they didn't know how to cope. They didn't think they'd have the confidence to cope if that happened in their session. And seeing me cope and, you know, do whatever was a real benefit for them. And actually they went off not only knowing a bit more about PebblePad, a lot more about mime and some silly jokes that I told, but about confidence and how to deal with it in the classroom. And I think all of that together, it's teaching the tech is the lowest thing actually, and it's about all the skills and behaviours that go on top. And I think as a sector, we're getting there. We're definitely getting there, and there's definitely things that we can do for efficacies. And I think that's a key thing for us. That if we can prove that it saves some time, it improves practice, and it has a real impact on learner outcomes, then we're in.
I think that's a really important answer. I'm just thinking about Diana's book, Teaching as a Design Science. It's not about the skills, right, Diana? It's about understanding the pedagogical approach.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's thinking about the pedagogy first, and then you go in search of the technology that will help. And I think, as Rachel says, that's exactly what the community, the teaching community in the sector is learning from each other and exploring and experimenting, and that's exactly the right way to go. It's the teachers who should be leading that. And to some extent, Course 2, the one which is running in February, Embedding Practice, is looking at the reality of what it means in the institution. And as Neil said, you can't do it top down. It just doesn't work because the leaders don't necessarily understand what it takes for the teachers to make that kind of shift. But I think the support of the leaders and leadership from them in every institution is important. And when we did a survey last year, I think it was, about the opportunities for doing blended learning in FE, the most frequent comment was there's no time and there's no leadership and there's no support. And we did a survey also of leaders and managers who said exactly the same thing. Because the leaders and managers are so concerned with the kind of the bread and butter every day, staying alive, staying sustainable, that it's just as hard for them to be able to take time out of that. I think one of the great myths about education is that, you know, nothing's changed since the 19th century. Nothing makes me more cross than hearing people say that kind of thing, because an incredible amount has changed, and it's all through people just essentially doing it in their spare time. I think teaching is the only profession where we've been asked to reinvent how we do what we do with technology while also doing the day job. If you're a banker or you're in retail or you're an administrator, you get vast sums spent on redoing the digital system that's going to support you in your job and trained to do it. We don't get any of that. I mean, we've got VLEs, you know, that's about it really. So I think, you know, I'm absolutely with what Rachel says about the way in which it is moving in the sector. I think it's moving actually quite fast given all of those circumstances. So let's hear it for the teachers. Doing amazingly well, actually.
Good, thank you. I'm going to ask a question from Twitter here. This is from Paul Warren, who's become one of my favourite people in the FE sector from his contributions on the course. So he says, any advice for tech trailblazers on a trail that doesn't want to be blazed? And I think you have to ask that question, don't you? Because we've all felt like that. But I genuinely believe that it does want to be blazed now, and just this course and the community and the enthusiasm of the people on it has demonstrated to me that this is an area of massive interest now within the sector and within education generally in this country and beyond. So I just think if you're in this at the moment, you're a star. Diana's just said it, but you don't give up now, because this is your moment. This is the moment where this happens.
Neil, one other piece of advice: live a long time. Because it's going to take a long time. You know, I mean, 40 years ago I thought, well, I'll just move into this area, get it all sorted out, and then go back to being the maths teacher I always wanted to be, with, you know, making use of new technologies. And I'm still in it, still trying to make the wretched thing work. And the technology has changed fantastically. We've got wonderful tools now, but the pedagogy doesn't change because of what we've all just been talking about, because we haven't had that investment in what it takes to innovate in teaching. And now could be a new beginning. And I'm absolutely with Neil on this, that you know, just hang in there. And the community is growing bigger. It's getting more and more competent and skilled. We will get there.
Great, thank you. I think there's kind of rhetorical question sitting here that says, I wonder how many CEOs and other senior management team people are on the course. I'm certainly not able to answer the question, but I'd be interested in the answer myself. It would be good if people did want to identify themselves. I certainly haven't heard much of that conversation in the platform of people saying I'm a college principal, but there's definitely that audience that needs to engage with this conversation.
We did think about that, and CEOs don't typically put themselves on courses, but the great thing about a MOOC is that it's something you can do it in secret, and it doesn't take a huge amount of time. We thought about promoting it to CEOs and heads and directors and so on, and in fact the next course is a bit about that. I mean, it would be something that leaders and managers could reasonably move into looking at. You know, occasional resources and activities would be of interest to them there. We might try that too.
Yeah, definitely. Right, I think we're down to the absolute last questions. So there has been a question about getting digital badges for the course. Diana, can you say something about the accreditation routes, possibly?
I can't really. I tried to have a chat with Maren about that, but she's in Berlin at Online Educa at the moment, which is a very important place to be. And she wasn't able to join us on the Hangout. I think we'll have to consult about that and come back with an answer on the platform, because I'm not absolutely.
Okay. I mean,
obviously we talked about it, but you know, we don't have a definitive answer.
Okay, there is lots of information on the platform and links already to the site about the accreditation routes, but because there are so many, it's quite hard for us to summarise it. I suppose that's the point. And then there was a question about translation tools and subtitles, which a number of people actually obviously provide subtitles in all the videos in the course, which we think is an expectation now for inclusivity. And people were saying, well, how am I going to either create these subtitles? How can we do translation? And I've put a few links on the platform in terms of tools that are available freely on the web to do translation. It is something that's quite easy to do yourself, and a number of people have also posted links to apps of how to create subtitles. Translation on videos is a bit more challenging, but subtitles is quite straightforward.
Yes, I think an important thing is to provide the transcript, because if you've got the transcript as a digital document, then where necessary you can cut and paste into even something like Google Translate, which, if you know how to use it, can work reasonably well. Don't rely on YouTube translations and captions. Not good at all.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're going to end on this last question from Colette Murphy, because she's reposted it. So Diana and Rachel, if you can just have a quick read as I'm reading it, it's just appeared. To embed digital skills to support employability into our curriculum for levels 5 to 7, what are the most important ICT skills to embed? Do either of you want to
Well,
look at that?
that's actually something that we tried to cover in the section on digital skills your learners need this week. And the best resource we could find was from the Welsh Government, which had a qualifications analysis of the essential skills for employment, which covers not just digital skills but literacy and numeracy as well, and other things. And we did use the ICT analysis of that. That's since been updated, and I posted a comment on that yesterday or the day before, with a link to the new version, which is a more compact analysis of the ICT skills, or digital skills, better described, I think, that are now needed. So I think that's a good place to start, because somebody's already done that work. So have a look at that. Can't remember the step number now. 5.9? No, maybe not.
Okay, good, thank you. So I think that's just about it. Unless either of you two wanted to say one last thing. Rachel's got her hand up.
I just wanted to build on Diana's thing. A good place to start as well is looking at just T-shaped graduate, which works for FE as well, because it's about the subject area and then the employability across the top, and actually what builds into that, and the skills that they need. And they've just released their report, so there's a whole host of stuff in there, FE based as well, that will help out.
I think we got that. Good.
Thanks for me to thank everybody for your questions. I'm a little Rachel, we're here to answer all of the questions that appeared on the platform, those that have come on the list, and even some from Twitter. So if you haven't, if you're watching this back, look at the hashtag FLBLE1 and you'll see all the questions and comments that arose during the session. And it just remains for me to thank Diana and Rachel very much for your time and for answering all of your questions.
Neil, could we just add one question to the community watching this, to advise us if they know anybody who's dropped out of the course, to see if they can help us figure out why?
Mm-hmm.
It'd be a good opportunity.
Good idea.
Thank you. Okay, and thanks to everyone. Good questions.
Good. Thank you very much.